always visit us at functionaldiagnosticnutrition.com. But for now, here is today's episode. All right. Hello, my friends, and welcome back to another episode of the Health Detective Podcast by Functional Diagnostic Nutrition. My name is Evan Transu, aka Detective Ev, and I will be your host for today's show, episode number 435 on the Health Detective Podcast. If you are watching live with us, welcome. As you can tell, I am currently on the road still. We're in Richmond, Virginia, and we're making the trek back tonight to Pennsylvania for 20 days. And then we are finally moving to the new headquarters in Austin, Texas. So if you guys haven't heard about that yet, we're very excited. The setup down there is going to be amazing. We're going to be doing about one in-person podcast every 2 weeks to a month, which is going to be cool because if you guys don't live in a big city, a lot of these cities now have these beautiful in-person podcast studios that you can rent very affordably. And we're very lucky because of you guys watching us on YouTube. We get some ad revenue coming in somehow with all the stuff that we say about natural health. We have not been demonetized yet, knock on something. And so we're able to use some of that money to go do these in-person podcast studios. So we're very much looking forward to bringing you that. But thanks for bearing with me in my unique background today while I'm in Richmond. Speaking of unique backgrounds, I just want to talk about this for our guest beforehand. She had a cool virtual background with her green screen there, but we had some tech issues and I wanted to make sure we got her on. This is always the one downside about doing it live is I don't want to make these guests reschedule, and I don't want to make you guys I can see some of you watching right now. I want to make sure that you guys get to watch the show that you expected. So I've met her before. We've actually had her on the podcast a couple of years back. So she's great, and you guys are definitely going to want to hear her story and journey. So don't worry about the background. It doesn't matter. It's about the content. One thing I want to share first, though, speaking of content, is our Clinical Edge event that's coming up in just a few days here, August 12th and 14th. And I know I'm missing the 13th there. That is on purpose. It is a 2-day event where we took Wednesday off because it's a massive event. This is completely free, by the way. So what the heck is the Clinical Edge? Clinical Edge is our first event ever where we are only having our clinical advisors at FDN here present case studies to you, again, for free. So what is a clinical advisor? A clinical advisor is the person or people that individuals like Sandy and I actually go to for help if we have really complex cases that we need support on or work on. So these guys are actually the folks that the graduates of FDN who are already trained very well, we already learned a lot, go to if we have a particularly difficult case or we need insight on something. So you guys are talking about people that live in the labs quite literally sometimes. They also have their own businesses. So they are looking at hundreds of lab tests every single year. They know it better than most of the people in the industry, and the event's completely free. They're breaking down their labs, breaking down their case studies. And so you can check it out at fdntraining.com/edge, EDGE. That's fdntraining.com/edge. You can also scan this wonderful QR code here in the top left corner, top left corner on your guys' screen, right above me, and that will take you there, or you just type in fdntraining.com/edge. Completely free event. Only thing that you'd have to pay for if you want is the recordings, and they're like $29 or something like that. But no need to pay for the recordings. Everything's done live. There's going to be Q&A for each person. And we set this up very, I think, intelligently for you guys. We've learned that doing 7 events or 7 sessions back to back to back to back to back to back is not always a good idea for you guys. So we've done about 3 or 4 sessions each day with 30-minute gaps. So you can go eat some lunch, get some sun, whatever you need to do, and then come back for nerdy content. So that's fdntraining.com/edge. We'd love to see you guys there. All right. For our guest today, I had to, since I'm traveling, I got a makeshift setup here. I do have her bio on my phone here. So Sandy is a busy mom who helps tired, hurting women uncover what their bodies are trying to say. Through advanced functional testing and faith-rooted support, she gets to the real root of symptoms like fatigue, PMS, mood swings, and gut struggles so clients can stop guessing and start healing. Sandy believes with simple science-backed steps and grace-filled guidance, you can feel like yourself again, clear-headed, energetic, and fully alive. I love the mix of both of those worlds there. So Sandy, welcome back to the Health Detective Podcast.
Thank you. Glad to be back.
Awesome. You know what? The way that I look at this is we're constantly getting new people listening. And quite frankly, even if it was the best podcast in the world, if someone listened 3 years ago to when I originally interviewed you, I'm sure they do not remember every detail. I like to consider myself smart. I don't remember every detail. So I feel like we could cover a lot of the same stuff, at least in the beginning, as we might have went over before. I'm going to hit you with the same question I hit everyone with. I'd like to know, what did this health journey look like for you, and when did these symptoms begin?
Yeah. So, going along with my title as far as being told I was normal. So, have had constipation way back since my childhood. And again, I just thought this is normal. Um, but then going into my college years and as I was graduating as a physical therapist assistant, so excited to start my career. I was finishing and had a day of PMS, right? Where I felt like I wanted to pass out and to go to the bathroom and nearly vomit. Like, I'm like, I cannot, be in my new career and be missing a day because of PMS. So I went to the doctor, sought help, and, instead of any testing or any investigation, any digging, it was simply, "This is normal, and here is your pill." And so I didn't know that there was options. I didn't know that food can make a difference. I didn't know that stress reduction was so important and just the lifestyle. I wish I could go back and talk to that person and say, "There's help, there's hope, there's options." But that was in my early 20s where it started. So fast forward 10 years of stress, American diet eating, definitely lots of movement. I played rugby, which was so fun, but also probably a little stressful on my body, but definitely a lot of fun. And then got married and had my kids. With my second boy, I started having some of the worst constipation ever. And after I had him, then the autoimmune really set in, and I was diagnosed with celiac disease 2 years later. Looked like I'd swallowed a basketball after I ate, felt incredibly dizzy. I felt stuck and I felt kind of hopeless. Like a whole new way of eating. How am I ever going to eat with my friends again? Just sad. It was just a hard time. And I feel like it is anytime we have a new autoimmune diagnosis, it's scary. And so I actually found Joe at that point, my FDN that I worked with, love her to death. And she taught me the lifestyle because I didn't want to do the testing yet. I didn't want to pay for it. I didn't want to take the money that was going to my family and put it on me. But when I did the testing, it helped me to understand what was going on. It gave me help and hope and a path forward. Um, so I might be skipping ahead there. I'm sorry, but that's kind of part of the journey is finally. And I did the testing when I joined FDN because I did it for other people. If I do this testing, I'll figure out what's wrong with me, and I'll be able to, by the grace of God, bless others. And so that was huge to really see that I'm not crazy, I'm not alone, and understand why my body felt not my own, and have specific steps to work on and go forward with. And so I continue to use those same steps as now I'm entering perimenopause and all the fun things. Like, this is a journey, and I feel incredibly empowered and excited to use this in my life and my son's life that was newly diagnosed with type 1 diabetes, another autoimmune in the family. Um, but having that hope there, that I believe that God gave our bodies this great ability to heal. It's missing a few things, and there's lifestyle habits that we can do consistently that will make a huge difference. And so, I am thrilled and honored to be able to do that with and for others.
Like working.
Yes, it's a little low.
All right, I'll switch back here. No worries. Sorry guys for any audio quality audio quality issues on my end. But one, I wanted to say this because I know that we have practitioners that watch a lot too, Sandy. It's not just consumers. Thankfully, it is as well. But it's also our practitioners. They like supporting FDNs and checking this out. I have to say this publicly because I think you're just such a testament. Like, I know that we're not the closest friends or anything like that, but we have each other on Facebook. You see my stuff. I see a lot of yours. You are just a perfect testament of someone who keeps showing up on the business side, keeps putting effort into that. I'm thinking back to when I interviewed you the first time, and I do remember it being a good story, but your clarity and confidence and just like having it down now, I'm like, whoa, that's a couple of years of just showing up, doing the work. And I can only imagine um, how much better and probably more well received you are if you go do like a public thing or whatever like that. I'm like, this is just, it's so cool. I like going back to my old podcast too. I hope people don't actually click on the first podcast of this health detective thing because it is pretty crazy. I always talk fast, but that's me personally. I was talking at like 4x because it was me personally plus nerves. So it's like listening to me just completely sped up. But yeah, this is really cool to hear from you again and where you're at now. Now let's get back to the health story side, obviously. I just want to dissect it a little bit more if we can. when you were dealing with these different symptoms and stuff, there is probably a point where you're just like, okay, this is my body and this is what's happening. I don't fully understand yet. What might have been like the time or the breaking point where you started to see it as abnormal and that made you want to even look into the functional side? Because who you're referring to is Joe Pate. Joe's been on the podcast before. She's actually a major part of our team for a while in terms of setting up the podcast, and she now helps FDNs on a lot of the business and social media side. So shout out to Joe. We love her. But you don't necessarily go to someone like Joe day one. There usually has to be a paradigm shift for you to be even open to this side of things. So do you recall at what point in your journey did you start really being open to this different functional side?
Yeah, I think it was a slow approach. I think it started with my dad being diagnosed with diabetes and realizing I gotta kind of watch my weight and blood sugar, right? So it started in a very small way there. But then when I was offered a pill instead of digging into why I had the bad PMS symptoms, it began to turn me off, along with a high deductible insurance. I didn't want to go back for more testing and another pill. I mean, I waited 2 years after I had my son to seek out help. And so after being diagnosed, that was helpful, right? But I still had all these symptoms despite a very strict gluten-free diet. And so that's where Joe came in, and the hope and the help that she gave me is absolutely amazing. But that was the turning point of I don't want a pill for this. I want to understand what's going on, and I want to do this a little more naturally.
With Joe, and I'm asking this again, I always try to interview both from the health side, but also the practitioner side, because I know we have both people in the audience. I know Joe is obviously a person of faith as well. Would you say that was one of the things that helped you guys connect personally? And then obviously the functional side came up with it, but do you think that was an important part of your decision to work with her?
Yeah, definitely. It definitely helps to have that I think that faith-based connection. And that's kind of something I've tried to incorporate more in my business because I realize that my relationship with him is my stress reduction. That's for me. And I don't want to push that on others. But I also just, give him the glory that he's the one that created our bodies to give that innate ability to heal. And so I'm learning to not be afraid of that because yeah, that faith is such a huge part of my healing journey and others as well.
The reason that I asked that is because I know some people, they can be, a little shy of sharing who they are and what they believe and what they don't believe. I take the exact opposite approach, and I encourage FDNs. And we're not saying you can be whatever you like, man. You can believe whatever you like, but whatever you believe, I think you should be willing to share out there. To your point, you don't have to push on anyone, but to share who you are, I think matters because that's how you attract your tribe, man. So all these things that sometimes are like taboo and we don't talk about, I think it's perfectly appropriate to share. You share that stuff on Facebook. I share that stuff on Facebook, not as much as you, but I do, and I'm not ashamed of that. And I want to attract people who also value those things. I have no problem working with someone who doesn't necessarily, but I think it's okay to do it that way. And Tracy said mine too, Sandy. So I think that's absolutely awesome. All right, in terms of people understanding, what it actually means, like I guess I'm trying to get around like the normal thing, right? Because so many people think that these symptoms or conditions are normal. How do you help connect with individuals now to make them realize that a lot of the things that we're experiencing in the modern world are in fact not normal? Because I know women in particular are just like troopers with this stuff. So if you're working with, let's say middle-aged women on average, they might have like four different things at this point and think like, oh, it's just getting older, or this is how it's supposed to be. So it can almost be kind of hard to convince someone out of this idea that that is not normal aging, that you're not supposed to feel like crud all the time. And I'll let you think about that for a second, because I did want to add on too, for those of you that, I'm a faith myself. For those of you that are not, it's not woo-woo to say you were given a healing ability in your body. I think some people automatically like, what the heck are these guys talking about? They reject that. I can prove to you that your body has that ability. Have you ever had a paper cut? Now, I don't know about you. I didn't have to tell my finger something weird or give it these instructions or, do something to it for it to heal. There is something in your body that is incredible that recognized, oh, there's an error here. This is not how the finger's supposed to be. And we're going to fix this. And you wake up every day, and then all of a sudden, within a few days, usually the paper cut's healed and you're good to go. And then it happens with even more significant things like a broken bone. And look, I don't know what these people believe. Do they think a cast all of a sudden fixes the bone? It's like, no, a cast is just so it grows back in place. Your body, it's the one that says, oops, this human has an error. They broke the bone. We're going to make sure this thing gets fixed. So if it can fix cuts, if it can fix broken bones, the body is always in this default state of trying to heal. But if we give it the wrong things, we don't allow that, what I believe as well, to be a God-given ability um, to work. And then again, even if you didn't believe that part, you still would believe or have to believe that the body has a healing ability, right? So I know I'm hitting you with a few things here, but I wanted to touch on that. And then I also wanted to talk about how you're kind of able to show people that maybe some of the things that they accepted as normal are not in fact normal.
Yeah. So as far as the healing is having that mindset and having that hope that no matter how stuck we feel, no matter what maybe new big diagnosis we have or what we're facing, there is hope to feel better, right? Do I think that I'm ever going to get to walk into Texas Roadhouse and have one of their biscuits? Probably not. But am I going to be able to enjoy food with my friends and family and not be scared to death about the symptoms I'm going to have the next day? Um, Am I gonna be able to play with my kids without so much joint pain and brain fog and all the things? And so just having that hope and that you can heal because we don't hear that in the system today. And so that's mindset and that's huge. I think as far as the normal goes, this is where I love the blood chemistry labs. And for me, I was even after my diagnosis, I'd go back and I would feel so inflamed and so anxious. And I would just hope and pray that they'd find something to give me an answer. But it's, oh, I'm sorry, everything was good. And I was frustrated to death, like I still feel like junk and there's nothing here. But the cool thing is those are clinical ranges and versus functional healthy ranges. I love working with Marianne at Lab Sports, and she spent 10 years researching what is healthy labs, especially for women, maybe in perimenopause and postmenopause, even absolutely men too. I don't mean to discredit men at all. We all want answers. We all want hope, but she knows, living at different elevations, and she studied with Dr. Walsh, and I know FDN has amazing, and I don't mean to amazing blood chemistry resources that I haven't even got to get into yet. There's always more learning to do. But when you take your normal labs and you compare them to these functional regions, you can find healing opportunities. And the cool thing is, as an FDN, you can get information on hormones, immune system, even some digestion and detox from a couple of simple, very affordable panels. That's what I love about the blood chemistry. And that's where I kind of needed when I started was a lower level hope, help, answers, and a way forward. And so that's why I love the blood chemistry because normal, but I can find all these amazing healing opportunities. I'm not diagnosing anything, right? All these amazing healing opportunities and some simple labs that your doctor's probably doing every year.
It's so cool. I don't know that I could be wrong. Again, it was a few years ago. I don't know that we got to talk about the blood chemistry side as much. And that is kind of interesting because I actually find, um, generally speaking, that that's one of the, I don't want to say harder. I don't want to misspeak. It's like more, let me word it this way. If I were to run a GI map on anyone, I feel like I can find some type of healing opportunity. Whereas with blood chemistry, and maybe this is my own ignorance, I feel like even with the functional ranges, there is some chance that the person's overall going to look decent enough. Now, again, I don't utilize this probably as much as I should. And by the way, the Lab Smarts thing is awesome. We've had her on a couple of times. She's just absolutely brilliant. And what she's done is great. So FDN totally recommends this as well. I think actually, if you guys are a graduate, make sure you're an AFDNP. We definitely have some type of discount code with her. So check that out. But my point is, with are you finding then that all of these people that you're working with, when you apply this kind of functional set of ranges, and especially utilizing Marianne stuff, are you finding that more people than not, or even the majority of people, do have something out of range from a functional perspective?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, so the the panels that I run, like I said, we find out about those hidden stressors that we talk about in FDN. And it may not be everyone, and it may not be the ones I'm thinking about. Like the last gentleman that I worked with was the first client I've had where the anemia, because the lab sports goes really deep into the anemia. And it was good. It was like everything was normal and good. I'm like, great. But then we had lots of inflammation showing up. We had some low testosterone showing up, huge for guys, right? But same for women. Do we have estrogen dominance? And I know the blood tests are not the perfect. I know, a Dutch is definitely ideal, but I think this is a nice step into like, hey, we want to be careful with this estrogen dominance and the PMS symptoms you're having, and how can we support the progesterone and da da da. So yeah, like I said, it may not always be what we think, but it will show some amazing opportunities that really highlight the need for the good diet, the rest, the movement, the sleep. And so that's really a lot of the purpose of the labs, to understand, what's going on, but also why do we need to do these things and kind of create that motivation.
I will say too, I mean, I know that you're running a custom panel, it sounds like, but I'm sure this has come up. One of the You can't argue this. The most amazing things about blood work is the fact that a lot of people have some blood work. Now, they might not have everything that we would want to run as functional practitioners, right? But a lot of people are getting these labs done, often covered by insurance or just a simple copay. And when you do look at it from a functional perspective, you can get a lot of insights there. And again, there's different things that I would want ran that are not as typical and standard blood work in Western medicine, right? Full thyroid workups, homocysteine, even just vitamin D sometimes. Stuff like that's not always there, but it is kind of cool when you can take a client, and a lot of this functional healthcare stuff, it does get quite expensive. Worth it? Yes, but it can get quite expensive. And then to be able to offer them something that is maybe just utilizing tools that they already have or already have a lot of, I think that's great. So do you ever, when you're working with clients, do you ever just take blood work that they already have, or do you prefer, I shouldn't say prefer, of course you prefer it. Do you ever just take the blood work they normally have, or do you always make them run some type of custom panel?
Yeah, no. In fact, the last client that we're just kind of starting to get to work together was, she said she had had some blood work in the last year. I was like, okay, great. Well, let's just have a session. Bring that blood work. I'll take a quick look at it and see kind of what glaring things show up. Let's talk about your symptoms and let's figure out the next best step forward. Is it the clarity panel, which is the blood chemistry, or is it a little more in depth testing? As far as the hormones and the minerals and of course the GI map. So that's always kind of my step two. But yeah, absolutely. I love geeking out over the blood work and finding good stuff in there.
Well, that already leads me to my next point here. I was trying to figure this out. I'm like, okay, are you starting with this blood work thing and then moving to those as a step two? And I'm sorry that I always have to put all these disclaimers on, but there are trainees listening, right? They might be a month in and they're like, well, wait, what about the foundational labs? I bring up my Picasso quote all the time. I'm sorry it's so cheesy, but everyone seems to understand this when I say it. Picasso supposedly had said you have to learn the rules like a master so you can break them like an artist. And what that means from an FDN perspective is Sandy was not an FDN just yesterday. You've been an FDN for years. I've been an FDN for years. A lot of people, and it's not even about the time that you've done it per se. It's about working with a volume of clients over the years as well. You start to learn what resonates best with your audience and what they might particularly need. So learning the rules like a master means having the humility. If, let's say, you came from some separate career path, we have a lot of accountants that become FDNs, right? Nothing wrong with being an accountant, of course. It's an important job, but you probably didn't learn anything about health to become an accountant. So if you become an accountant, work on that for 20 years, and then decide to become an FDN, have the humility to learn the rules like a master. Understand that you don't know anything about this yet. Use the set of labs that's given to you. But breaking them like an artist means, okay, you know what? I have this specific clientele that I work with, or I have this group of people. I've taken the time maybe to get advanced training on other types of things. So I can break these like an artist, still serving the client at the highest level, but changing it a little bit in that case. So just wanted to put the emphasis on there so they're not getting all confused. Like, wait, the Sandy woman's an FDN, but it's blood work. I didn't learn blood work in the course. So my next question then would be, is this actually the standard way? Like if I were to come work with you as your average client tomorrow, are we always starting with the blood work and then are you using that as a tool to branch out into the other functional tests?
Typically, yes, because I think that the chemistry blood work is almost meeting them where they're at. Everyone has lab work done almost every year, and they have a little bit better. They have that at their disposal, and you can begin to get information about them, and their struggles and their symptoms to kind of help lead both you and them as to what's next. And so It really depends on where they're at and what they need. If it's someone who has really been doing the lifestyle and they want kind of more in-depth insight, absolutely, we can go straight into the functional labs. But I really felt that the blood chemistry was, like I said, meeting them where they are at, but also, Jen Malek always talks about buy what you it's have what you would have thought. And this is absolutely where I would have started. Like, hey, I can do 250, pay that for labs anyway. So now I'm going to get functional results. I'm going to get some a few steps forward as for feeling better, and then also just have that connection with this, health coach. So health practitioner. So that's kind of, yes, how it runs. And again, I wanna meet the client where they are and what they need most. But yeah, in an ideal world.
I think it's brilliant. And again, guys, it's never meant, if you are an FDN trainee or grad, it's never meant to be contradictory. It's just like there is a system that we need to teach, and then there's also the real life business stuff. Um, I also always joke with Reed because I don't think he understands how powerful of a presence he is and how good he is at the sales side. Like I've seen that guy at conferences, man. That dude can freaking sell. So for some of us where maybe it wasn't as natural, or we're working with different communities, yeah, to be able to offer something super insightful that, to your point, is only a couple of $100. What a great way to get people in the door. And I also think, and Reed, he doesn't say this publicly, so I gotta be careful here. He does recognize the validity of a lot of this stuff with the changing markets. So many people nowadays have spent unbelievable amounts of money on these crazy programs that they do get burned out. So when we can offer them something that gets them in the door, at a much more affordable rate, and then we get to prove to them that we really are different. We know that you've heard that 1,000 times. We're sorry that you heard it 1,000 times. FDNs really are different. So when they get to experience that at that lower price point, then I think that they're able to realize longer term, okay, this is someone that I'm willing to invest with. Most of these people don't have a problem with investing per se. They have a problem with investing money and getting kind of, burnt every single time, which all of us would. So, all right, I want to get a little nerdy with the blood test in particular. So let's say I come to you, we start with the blood work. What are the markers that like you would see on, because I'm pretty ignorant to a lot of the blood work stuff. I can make my way around the test, but I can already tell and promise that you would know way more than me about it. So like, what would be some of the things that you see that might be a warning sign to be like, all right, Ev, we're going to look at your minerals, or hey, Ev, we're going to look at a GI map or wherever you might go next with it. What are some of the most common things or patterns that you're seeing that would lead to like an HTMA test, GI map, or Dutch, or whatever it is that you use? All right, guys. Well, thank you for bearing with us there. We had a little bit of a technical difficulty, and we're a very conversational and real podcast. So you guys have probably noticed our different backgrounds by now. We're not going to not address that. We did have to schedule a little bit of a re-recording for the back half of this podcast, which is no worries at all. We're going to pick up where we left off with Sandy and then just continue as normal as we would for these podcasts. So I was just in the middle of asking you what I think is probably a great question, hopefully not just to toot my own horn, but because I think the audience is really going to want to hear this. So one of the things that you have said throughout this podcast so far is that, blood work is actually one of your standard labs. And we were talking about why, for a variety of reasons, that's actually very intelligent. If you do get the proper training on the blood work side, it is extremely useful because even a comprehensive blood lab is fairly cost effective, comparatively speaking. And if you get really lucky, especially if you're a US based practitioner, you're having these doctors that will pretty much run some standard blood work and cover it through insurance almost any day of the week. Now, are they going to run the markers that we want? That's a whole different story and a different podcast probably. But you do actually have a lot of clients that are coming to you with some recent blood work, generally speaking. So what I'm curious about now is how you're utilizing the blood work markers that you're getting back to make a decision on what labs you might do next. You've mentioned things like the GI map, HTMA, et cetera. So I'm wondering, what are some of the patterns or things that you might see on a blood work panel that, let's start with one, just so I don't get you confused here by asking a bunch of different questions. What are some patterns that you might see on the blood work that would lead you to saying, okay, you know what? I really want to go take the HTMA route now for this particular client.
Yeah, so in your complete metabolic panel, which is something that most doctors will order every year, you get your basic glucose in there. you actually get your sodium, potassium, and chemical. And so you can see, okay, is this in functional range first? Because again, the clinical versus the functional is different. And there are many times that at least one of those is out of functional range. And so it's not quite as cool and techy, but there's some basic electrolytes there. I love adding in a magnesium, especially for anyone with, people that tend to overthink. We think too fast, we have trouble focusing, and then anything with hormones. I mean, magnesium is just one of those things we need, or even sleep. So I love that adding that in when we can, but it's not something it's going to be ordered every year by our doctor. So those, and then also it's a little bit of lifestyle, listening to their symptoms and what they've kind of been through. Have they been, in pain for several years? Have they had issues ongoing? And also just knowing that, oils are just generally depleted at this point. And there's a lot of people that I've heard that in many different, scopes of life. And so I do believe that even the best diets are still probably mineral depleted. And then you add to the fact that when we're stressed, we're just eating through those minerals very quickly. And this is all stuff I've learned through the AFDNP, just all the learning opportunities that you guys provide. Most of that has come through that. And so just learning that we really need a lot more of those minerals than we can really take in, even with the best diets. And so that's why it's another kind of foundational, but those markers help me to explain to a potential client why it would be helpful.
That's awesome. I like that you mentioned the soil thing in particular because I think people forget this. And when I jumped into the world of FDN, before like I got into the course, I mean, I had this kind of what you would almost call a purist view, which is where I kind of believe that, oh, there's going to be a day where I might just not need any supplements, any medication whatsoever. And I'm not even necessarily saying someone needs any one particular thing, but we do need to get real about where we're at in history and where we are at currently in the world. But think about these electrolyte supplements, for example. This is something that actually always fascinates me. And I don't know why it doesn't fascinate other people. Maybe it does, and maybe we just don't get to talk about this in standard conversation. But I'm thinking about like LMNT or liquid IV or any of these things. Think about how much sodium and potassium's in a lot of this stuff. And a lot of people feel better when they take these things. I mean, LMNT has 1,000 milligrams of sodium in just one packet, and many people will take 2 or 3 a day. And you can't help but sit there and wonder, at least in my case, how is it that people are even able to intake so much extra through supplementation? I'm like, my ancestors and your ancestors clearly did not whip out the LMNT packet and then just, put it in their water bottle or something. But not only is it working for people, many people actually respond to it extremely well. And so I'm not necessarily saying run out and get that specific brand or that specific electrolyte solution. That's not what I'm saying at all. It's just interesting that people are responding so positively, generally, to something that you'd think like, how would this be possible in nature? But to your point, when the soil is depleted, when we're not getting the proper minerals that we're supposed to be getting naturally, there might be a very strong case that most people would benefit from some type of longer term supplementation with these things. I know for myself, a digestive enzyme is something I still choose to use with every meal. There's all this controversy and arguments around like, well, if you use digestive enzymes, you might break down your normal enzyme production. I'm like, bro, I'm someone that was on 20 courses of antibiotics before the age of 18. I'm just happy to be living a normal functional life and be healthy enough to be able to do podcasts like this. If a digestive enzyme is the one thing I have to take long term, I'm cool with that. But to follow up here on the blood work versus HTMA specifically, and I'm sure this is very nuanced. I don't want to put you on the spot with something that might be quite technical, but I'm curious, what are the general differences between how blood work is measuring these minerals versus how a hair tissue mineral analysis is measuring these minerals? Because I would have to imagine there is a difference, right? If not exactly the same, or am I incorrect?
Yeah. So I will tell you what I know because I have learned that as we learn more, there's so much we don't. So a few of the things that I've heard, and again, a lot of this through FDN. The nice thing about the HTMA is you're actually looking back 3 months, but you're also looking more at the tissue available to your tissues. And honestly, my mind is still kind of putting this together because my dad was just in the hospital for like severe kidney failure. And you talk about the opposite of what I know. Like his body's holding on to magnesium and potassium, so he cannot take extra, right? right? I mean, it's just crazy. But he is like creatinine very high. He was close to even dialysis. And so it's just, but they're still like, essentially what they were doing was working to balance is we need to lower the potassium and magnesium. We need to work on calcium. And even they didn't say this, but he got a bunch of sodium chloride. Um, so it's just interesting about that balance and where you're at and what your body needs. But I think the blood work, to me, I think of the chemistry and trying, and there's definitely a different balance there, obviously, right? When we have a lot of potassium in our blood, there's not a lot of potassium in our cells, and vice versa. So when you get that unbalance, then your cells aren't really getting what they need. And we need those minerals to be constantly getting all of our insulin, our thyroid hormone, um, just all the basic things. We need the minerals there to do their job. And that's always something that there's more to learn about. But we need enough there to do its job and we need them balanced. And so that's why, because for me, I had actually been through all the testing and I did HTMA kind of last, and it was the spark. It was like the spark that started my car and it really changed things for me. And so that's why as women that go and go and go and don't get very often because we feel guilty if we are taking time to eat, if we are taking money away from our family. And so, as women that go and go and go and often self sacrifice, I think it's super important to make sure that we are, and that's always my first piece of advice is we're going to work on increasing nutrition and your minerals because it's likely that we've kind of ignored ourselves for a while. And so to really jumpstart anything, I can't put you on a gut protocol until you have enough of these nutrients for your body to do basic digestion, basic movement of molecules in and out of the cells. So we can begin on a small level to detox some stuff out before we start killing stuff off. And so that's one of the biggest things I've learned as a practitioner is start sick and start with whatever way they can getting some nutrition in. Early on I became a big fan of body armor because everyone has their I had rural clients that didn't have natural grocers or anything nearby, but they had a body armor that they could go get and at least start there. And it's not perfect about the B12 in there, but kind of have to do what you can where you can. So
That's what I love about a lot of the ways that you talk about this stuff, because you have this great clinical mind. Like, you really just, especially in the last, again, a few years since I interviewed you previously, it's just cool to see the upgrade in your knowledge. But I like that you also have this very human side, and very realistic side. Like if you're working with rural clients, like you said, they might not even have the privilege of some natural food store. So we got to meet the person where they're at. And we have to all remember as practitioners, that is significantly better than them doing nothing, right? Just because it's not the perfect standard that we might want, does not mean we're not dramatically helping this human being. And I love that you mentioned body armor, because when I lived, I just moved, right? But when I lived in Wilmington, North Carolina, I dealt with this a lot. There was like a Whole Foods store. And then pretty much if I traveled 30 minutes outside of this for my pickleball tournaments or something like that, which is normally why I traveled outside of it, there was nothing to be seen natural health food wise for a while, probably down until like Charleston, South Carolina, or as far as Charlotte, North Carolina. These things are 2 and 3 hours away, respectively. When I was on the road, I'd grab something like body armor. Is that what I do every day? No. Is that what I do all the time? Also, no. I actually have methylation issues, so I really try not to get that form of B vitamin, but it works for me, and it's better than being dehydrated on the road.
exactly right. Yeah, and 100%. I feel that too. Like I'm close to Kansas City, so there's a lot of stuff there. But if I travel south in Missouri, there's nothing, and there's nothing gluten free. They're like gluten free what? So I'm like living on like my clean whey protein that I've found in Body Armor and the cleanest jerky that I can get at the gas station. There's some brands, some fatties or whatever that I can get me.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I always just, I like to bring this up. I don't necessarily want to get into it too deeply, but it's this sad kind of double-edged sword that we have in America right now, where so many of the more rural communities, unfortunately, have been kind of tainted by a lot of the genetically modified crops, excessive use of very nasty pesticides. But it's like, this is the lifeblood of our country. We need to start the healing there. And at the flip side, I'm about to move to Austin, Texas. I mentioned that, sorry, I think probably earlier in this podcast when we recorded the other day. But this is the funny thing about Austin, Sandy. I'm going to be exposed to a ton of EMF. It's the 11th largest city by population in America, ton of smog, I'm sure, all that stuff. But the flip side is I can go a mile down from my apartment with my wife and go to a certified gluten-free restaurant that doesn't even have gluten on the facility and the employees aren't allowed to bring it in. So that go figure, right? We have to just bring the education around to all of these areas and try to restore, I think, that lifeblood of our country. While also, having some of these cool things that we can in cities. I digress. I want to follow up here a little bit and just talk about the blood work again. So you mentioned some of the things that you might see, which are kind of obvious, right? Sodium, potassium, magnesium. You can see these things on blood work. They might be huge clues for what we need to look at on the HTMA. Do you use the blood work then to get you clues for hormone tests or stool tests or any other type of tests? And if so, what would those be?
Yeah, there's some fun things that you could find in there. But it's also just kind of like I said, a first step to find healing opportunities too, and to encourage them on, hey, here's some quick wins. Here's some things that you really want to do based on what this is saying. But yeah, so things like eosinophils being a little bit high can be a parasite issue. I knew this, but the neutrophil lymphocyte can be an inflammatory marker. Those are again are on every I say CMP, CBC. That's the stuff the doctor's going to order every year. And then of course you have your liver, which we know if there's a lot going on in the gut, there's a huge connection there, right? If there is stuff going on in the gut, it's very much burdening the liver. And so, um, and then 80% of your immune system is in the liver. And so if your total globulin is low, well, why? We really need to go look at your SIG-A on stool test. I'm trying to think of what else, but there's so much there to highlight. Like I said, the immune, the detox, not as much the digestion. Sometimes the digestion comes through in the amazing anemia stuff that Marianne has on there. She'll kind of say, okay, well, this pattern shows that they may not have enough hydrochloric acid to digest their food. And so that's where that can point to, let's take a deeper look at your digestion, but let's also maybe check your thyroid too, because I didn't realize that low thyroid affects our stomach acid. And so you really can be in a lot of, for me in particular, women who have been going, we're low on the nutrients. Maybe our thyroid's beginning to struggle. The stomach acid is struggling. And we know as FDNs, that's a tough problem that's going to affect things down the line, right? Because then we're not digesting food correctly. We're not breaking it down correctly. We're not disinfecting it correctly. So, and then, of course, with the hormones, you have I love putting in estrogen and progesterone, which, as we mentioned earlier, blood work is really not the best way to see the bioavailable hormones. But it's a way, it's a quick glimpse into, is there some possible estrogen that relate to the symptoms that they're having? And what can we do about it? And so we can go and look at the liver enzymes and see is maybe that part of it. But again, there's even a couple liver markers on the GI map as well. And so those are just some of those fun little pearls that I look for. But I'd say a lot of it is just where they're at and finding some healing opportunities to just get them started. If they're just, because we start so tired and just, I did. I was so tired and really struggling that we kind of got to start small. And so that's where the blood work is nice. But it's
I
definitely the first
completely
step
agree with
to
you.
that deeper testing.
Yes. I completely agree with you. And I think even for a lot of us, I was 21 when I started this work as an FDN. I would describe myself as tired at the time. I was exhausted. And in fact, my HPA axis dysfunction, when you looked at that chart, it was in the exhausted phase, right? So I agree with you that meeting these clients where they're at and kind of giving them that little boost, that's the stuff that's going to allow them to make the proper changes elsewhere. Because if you have no energy, if your brain's all fogged up, like it can be impossible to retain some of this information, let alone make the changes. So yeah, I think this is great. And I'm noticing a common theme here with this blood work stuff. This is a great lesson for, I think, both the consumer and a practitioner. We use this as a clue where you keep bringing up this idea of like what's actually in the cell or what's bioavailable. That's one of the reasons we use a lot of tests as FDN. Like a lot of people will ask, like, well, why do you measure the testosterone in saliva? My doctor measures it in blood. Well, there's nothing wrong necessarily with measuring it in blood, but there is a difference when you do salivary testosterone. This is not our opinion or some functional anecdote. This is scientifically sound. that shows you what the body's actually able to use right now. You could have super high levels of something and not be utilizing much of it at all. And similarly, you could have relatively low levels, but your body's being actually efficient in the low levels that it has. So always kind of good to get this first line of screening and then kind of go to this next thing here if you're trained in that. So I love this. There's no way that we're going to be able to just go for exactly 20 minutes. It feels inappropriate. We only have half a podcast together. So probably stay for a few extra minutes here, but I'll transition us a little bit. Do you work with clients? Because you brought up the rural thing before. Do you work with a lot of clients that are in more rural areas?
Yeah, because I live in a rural area. Like we have a little homestead. I milk my own cow. I get my own milk. That's how I can tolerate dairy. I mean, it's a beautiful thing in that way. But so I live in a rural. My heart is to serve my community in any way that I can. My community and my church body and the church bodies around me. It's to strengthen them because those are heading toward a diagnosis of autoimmune. I want to be there for them, but I would also like to prevent it for them if we can see some things coming. But there's just so much fatigue and so much pain, so many gut issues that affect how we live our lives and affect how I feel that we can live out God's calling on our lives. It certainly affected mine when I was so tired and irritable and strong. I'm just kind of doing one step at a time, let alone I feel, God can meet us where it's at and he's amazing. But I want to help strengthen and energize and power, you know, the people around me to be more effective. So
Well,
that's huge.
Sandy, I kind of wanted to get to this part of the podcast because for me, when we did our last interview, and you might remember this because I know that you actually, I remember your name. You commented on it when I posted it on Facebook, which I thought was awesome and very nice of you. I was not baptized or of this particular faith when we last interviewed. So a lot of things have changed for me. But I will say, as someone who grew up about as hardcore atheist as you can be, and when I say hardcore atheist, I mean like arguing people in school and unfortunately making kids cry sometimes because I was just like, I was like, why are you going to church on Sunday? Like, I just did not get it. And I can't say this is true for everyone. I am sharing what's true for me. The healthier that I got, I felt that my body started to, I felt like I was more spiritually connected. I have no idea how else to say that. That's again a separate podcast, but I started to feel things in a way that I had never felt. And then, of course, I did my own studies that led me to the conclusions that I have now. That's not necessarily the point. But the point of my next question is for someone that's working in these rural communities, for someone that is obviously very big on the faith side and then also wants to help faith-based communities, how are you breaking into that effectively? Because what I'm getting at is like I've been a part of a community, church community in Pennsylvania where, listen, I love these people. They're very nice. They're not judgmental. They'd be open to anything that I said, but being open to something doesn't mean that I'm actually breaking through effectively and getting them to change things. And it's kind of, it makes you go like, like your face just reach your palm instantly because I'm walking into the church and it's Sunday morning and they got the donuts and the coffee and sugar and all this stuff. And again, I'm not saying this from a judgmental standpoint. I'm just like, guys, the body, the temple. We talk about food in the Bible. I'm like, are we reading the same thing here? Because this seems like something that you're supposed to take care of. So how do you break through to people like that? Because I do know that there's a fraction of our audience that's very interested in breaking through to those communities as well.
So to be real honest, I'm still working on that one and still trying different things. I've talked to my pastor several times, so he knows what I do and he's on board with supporting me. That would actually would press things. I think when I finally went to my pastor and said, "This is what I'm doing, and this is my heart. What can I do?" And then this last year, I really changed the mind shift on my business of I just want to serve. And it went from I want to build the business to absolutely have a calling that I must continue with no matter what. And so I met with another gal who also she's actually had cancer and she has her own background in my little church. And so we came together and just kind of developed a little another ministry in the church. Um, we're the BCU Wellness Warriors, and we have a little Facebook group. And the on is meeting at our little coffee shop twice a month, and we walk and we have coffee. And so trying to create that community. I think is kind of where it's at. And then you create that safe space. And then however and wherever I can in the group, I kind of give like we did a challenge this summer, which seemed pretty cool. We did protein, minerals, and movement. And we just really worked on increasing those over a month. And I heard some, cool stories. There was a gal that was like 8 months pregnant and she was this challenge got her to drink more water. And she was like, hey, I'm 8 to 9 months pregnant and I'm still moving around in the summer and doing okay because I'm drinking this water. And I think she was getting some minerals into. And I'm like, yes, that's awesome. And so that would be the goal is just continuing to kind of honestly praying and some, okay, God, well, how can we do this? But just continuing to be a safe place for them. And again, my part is just to really empower and educate however and whenever I can. And so through, I want to do more speak church program or maybe get some other, those are just some ideas. And so we're still something we're working on.
I think you're, and this was true in both podcasts, and nothing changed here. Your heart just shines through in everything that you do and say, my friend. Even just the way that you approach the labs, like there, there's such an obvious concern for the people that you're working with. You're like, this is how I'm using the blood work to make this more affordable for people. So everything's about, I've said this a few times, this podcast, meeting them where they're at. So if anyone's going to do it, it's going to be you. And I appreciate your transparency too, in saying that it's still something you're trying to figure out. It is tough and it's almost like a cultural change, right? Because so many people, even like my parents had a small restaurant when I was younger, and they weren't like hardcore atheists, but they weren't like people of faith. If anything, they'd be a little closer to the second option, honestly, but they weren't one way or the other, really. It was quite neutral. But even they recognized how many people we'd expect the squad of people to come in Sunday mornings right around 10:30 to 11 o'clock, because church let out. And we knew that everyone was going to flood in and get this crappy cafe food, and just like pancakes and all that kind of stuff. So, cool. I'm excited to see what you do with it, because that's a cultural thing that probably we need to shift a little bit. And I think everyone's going to be better for it once we do. With that said, I'd love to talk about, to the degree that you're able, from a privacy standpoint, any cool client testimonials or just amazing stories of healing and transformation. I always love to hear about someone that came to one of our practitioners. They feel like they're at the end of the rope. Or maybe they're just in a rural community like you, and they don't know how to do this stuff or where they would even get access to it. And yet by working with you and applying the principles, they were able to make great strides with their health. So if you have any stories like that come to your mind, I'd love to hear one of them, please.
Yeah, one of my favorites over the last couple of years is a gal that, and I may have shared this last, I'm not sure, but she she is a mom, in fact, a homeschool mom, and she would be stuck on the couch at least 2 to 3 days a month, if not more. Just couldn't really get up, couldn't function because her stomach hurts. And so we worked together. We did some work on the GI map, found that I can never say this right. The H. pylori, I may have actually said it right for once. And so big healing opportunities with her, along with some other things. So we did that protocol together. We ended up working together for like 5 or 6 months. So she was obviously one of my more in-depth clients. But by the end of the 6 months, she was like, I can't remember the last time that I was on the couch. And I was, yes, like this mom has got her energy back and she's flowing and empowered. And in fact, just a couple of weeks ago, we emailed and she looked over some stuff that I'm working on for some, just to send out to give me some feedback on it. And she said she seemed to be doing well. So that's one of the big ones. I had another gal that was doing a lot of amazing things in her life, the movement, some decent food, but we made a soda swap. We did the testing to find inflammation and some help with hormones and a few adjustments in her daily routine, and found that she was able to start hiking again, and pain had really kind of limited her. And she wanted to know, like, okay, what do I need to take in order to help this pain? And so we ended up doing all this testing and working together. Again, it was several months and it takes time. It's putting these little steps in over time consistently. It makes a huge difference. And so those are my two biggest that I really love to share over and over again.
Nice. I love the work that we get to do as practitioners, man. Like, people think about it and getting your health back, which you'd assume is already important enough. But unless you have been through these health challenges yourself, I do not think the average person comprehends what it is really happening when you do get your health back. You don't just get your health back, you get your life back. Life gets affected
Yep.
when your health is affected. So when you have the ability to be that bridge for someone to get their life back, that's like the biggest blessing in the world. What a cool way to be able to do work. So, Sandy, for those that are listening to you, because we don't bring in on practitioners because each of them are unique. And with one of the things that you said, whether it's the rural communities, the faith-based side of things, the way that you approach the labs, if they're listening to you and they're like, that's my woman, I want to work with her, where can they find you, my friend?
So a couple of different things. I have a website, mtchealthandwellness.com. That's down there. There's also, um, I can, you can get my email is there. And so get on my email. In fact, I think my phone number is even on there too. So you can get a hold of me that way. I have a 3 reasons why your labs are normal, but your body is not. That's a free guide that I love to send out to kind of let people learn and get some content from me and see if we're a good fit. So there's that. And then there's also YouTube, MTC Health and Wellness on YouTube. So, and I hope to be adding more information there. So that would be a great place to go and hang. There's more to come on YouTube. Big thanks.
Excellent. Sandy, signature question to finish up the show today. And of course, I'll leave your website down there for the remainder of the next couple of minutes. And if you're on the audio side, please make sure to check the show notes so that you can at least give Sandy a follow on one of her platforms. Like even if you don't need to work with her, at least follow her and support our crew. We would love that. Our signature question though for the show, this can be any answer that you want. You can interpret it any way that you want. If we could give you a magic wand, you could wave it and you could get all of our viewers and listeners to do just one thing for their health. What is the one thing that Sandy gets us to either start doing, or you can get us to all stop doing one thing as well?
It goes back to the minerals, like I said earlier. How can we increase basic magnesium, potassium, good sodium, a good kind of food-based calcium? So minerals and then just nutrients, man. Meats, fruits, and veggies. And maybe a digestive enzyme.
Sounds good to me. Sandy, it's awesome to have you back on 300 episodes later. Hopefully we have you on again before episode 732. But we appreciate you making this work with me in 2 sessions here. You rock.